Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the investment meeting for May 2014. Let's quickly go around the room, introduce ourselves for the record.
Good morning, everyone. Rosemary DeBellis, representing the Police Commissioner.
Doug Maynard, representing the Police Commissioner.
Barry Dennis, SIS.
Joe Alejandro, PBA.
Chris McGrath, PBA.
Lou Turco, LBA.
Chris Monahan, CEA.
Kenny Sparks, DEA.
Karen Paxtis, DEA.
North Actuary.
John Dorsey, Controller's Office.
Martin Gantz, Controller's Office.
Catherine Diaz, General Counsel, Controller's Office.
Susanna Vickers, Controller's Office. Celine Irani, Controller's Office.
Justin Holt, Mayor's Office.
Janice Emery, Mayor's Representative.
Bob Senske, State Pension Fund.
Kevin Holleran, Pension Fund.
James Bongodio, Controller's Office.
And John Mercer, Controller.
Nicole Jambrisi, Pension Funds.
Okay, and Lou, you have the proxy for the SBA, correct?
Correct.
Okay. With that, turn it over to Seema.
Thank you. So if everyone would turn to their monthly performance reports. So we're going to talk about March numbers. I'll give you an update on how April was for us. But I want to walk through a couple of these economic slides just to give a sense for some explanation for what's been going on, because we had a down January, we had a big up February, and we've been kind of flattish for March and April. Where signs of the U.S. economy look okay, the equity markets seem reasonable, and the 10-year Treasury is still under 3%. So if you turn to page 3, this is the ISM Manufacturing Index, and a lot of us look at this and say, you know, anything over 50 shows expansion in the economy. And so now here we are with a tick up from even last month at 53.7. Then if you go to page 10 and we look at retail sales, again, all of this reflective of how well the U.S. economy seems to be doing. And here you see, you know, a slight tick up in the month of March from February, and actually just kind of stable overall. On the next page, U.S. auto sales, you see actually a nice upward trend over the last several months, and then, you know, this big uptick in March. If you go to page 18, this is the VIX, so it's the volatility index. And you can see here at under 14 as of March, it's quite low. Right? So that shows us that, you know, people don't necessarily have a lot of caution out there in the markets, which you can argue is, you know, a sign of caution that should be there, or actually things are pretty good. But then you look at the 10-year, which is now on page 20. This is the 10-year Treasury. And it's still below 3%, so it's at 2.7%. Which you might think, well, that might mean that there is caution in the market and people are leaving the equity markets and going into 10-year Treasuries. So we're kind of at this point where the flattish market's starting to make sense. If you turn to page 23, these are the price to earnings ratios for the U.S. stock market, so the Russell 3000, the EFA markets, that's developed markets, and then the emerging markets. And I'll just point you to the right numbers here. So the 13.3 times for the Russell 3000, the 11.7 times for the EFA markets, and then the 8.8 times for emerging markets. This is looking 2 years, this is looking 1 year out, so 2015 numbers. If you look at these multiples, they're actually in line to even slightly below the 10-year average. So again, the stock markets look reasonably priced. So now let's just go to page 27 and talk about what happened in March. So the Russell 3000 in the month of March was up 53 basis points. The EFA markets down 64. The emerging markets up 3%, so you're starting to see a rebound in the emerging markets. Those valuations got quite low, and we're seeing investors go back into that asset class. You scroll down a little bit more to Core Plus 5, and that was down 15 basis points. High yield up 23 basis points. Tips down 47 basis points, and converts down 1.74%. Now, for the month of April, I'll just give you these numbers if you want to jot them down. The Russell 3000 was up 12 basis points. EFA was up 1.5%. Emerging markets were up 37 basis points. Core plus 5 was up a little over 1%. High yield up 60 basis points. Tips up 1.4%, and converts down 14 basis points. So if you turn to page 29, we'll walk through where the money, where the returns came from in the month of March. So you see the far left bar, the 1 month total fund was up 50 basis points. So with all this uncertainty and all this unevenness in the marketplace, it's a good number. And then if you scroll a couple bars over, the fiscal year to date then through March is up over 13%. Now if you add in April, which we would estimate is up about 25 basis points, that would mean that then fiscal year to date for the police pension fund through April is up about 13.5%, which is a very strong number. If you look at the next page 30, again, this is as of March 31. So you can see in the far left bar, the green bar, which is U.S. equities, and then the blue bar to the right, which is Core plus 5. And now we're back within the ranges, and we had mentioned to you that we had sold down U.S. equities and added to Core plus 5, and that is reflected now here. And the AUM as of the end of March was $32.6 billion, but I can tell you that as of May 2nd, which would have been Friday, the fund is now at $32.8 billion. So, great number. The next several pages are the monthly numbers by manager, and then the cash flows for private equity and real estate. And if there aren't any questions, we can move to the next item. Okay, thanks. So next up is the placement agent resolution, and I'm going to turn it over to Susanna.
Good morning. It's still morning. The Controller's Office is pleased to offer a resolution prohibiting the use of placement agents or intermediaries in the engagement of public and private markets. This was something that that the Controller's Office has spoken about, feels strongly about, that it's important to formalize the informal ban that has been in place across all systems since 2009, when resolutions were passed at the boards banning placement agents in public equities, in private equities, excuse me. It's been the practice since then not to engage placement agents in any of the other asset classes. And we know that this is a priority coming from Albany, and it's been formalized on the state level. And so the goal is to put the city pension funds in line with what's happening on the state and formalize the ban around all asset classes. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about the resolution?
Yes. Is this a total prohibition?
Yes.
Okay. Is it, and what does it mean in the resolution, which has been handed around this morning, where it says all public and private markets firms? What's a public and private markets firm?
So, a public market firm is either a public equities or public fixed income manager. And then the private markets would include private equity, hedge funds, excuse me, real estate, infrastructure.
So would that cover any potential firm that this fund would retain to make investments?
Correct.
And can someone explain to me why this prohibition is in the best interest of the fund?
I can address that. Superintendent Lawsky, who examines the pension funds, directed a letter to former Comptroller Liu stating that the Department of Financial Services would be conducting examinations across all the funds, and one of the areas he highlighted was conflicts of interest. We know from what happened at the Common Retirement Fund, we all lived through that, that we don't even want the appearance of any possible impropriety, and it is in the best interest of the fund not to have any decisions made that could possibly be tainted in any way by any conflict of interest.
Has anyone evaluated whether, if there was a placement agent who had no conflict of interest, let's suppose that was a fact, has anyone ever contemplated whether or not excluding those people might have the possibility of eliminating possible investments that would be in the best interest of the fund? Has anyone thought about that or analyzed it or quantified it?
We've looked at what the past interaction with placement agents has been. I think since 2009, there are only 2 investments that have come before us successfully that have used placement agents. Since then, the Controller's Office and the Bureau of Asset Management has made a big push to seek out emerging and small managers. We just had a big conference that had over 750 firms engaged, and we've just dedicated staff resources by way of a individual staff person in each asset class to be a point person for smaller firms to engage them in navigating the city process. So we hope that the processes that we put in place will cast the widest possible net when we're looking at investments that'll be to the benefit of the pension funds.
Has anyone ever quantified the impact of such a prohibition, whether it's on this fund or comparable funds across the country?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you think that should be done?
I don't see.
And we're aware of no negative impact on the common retirement fund.
But have you looked?
Indeed, they
have you-
labored under the prior system of placement agents.
Has the law department been asked for an opinion on this?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, but our general counsel's here, and it's been reviewed by the general counsel's office and the controller's office, and obviously a lot of legal scrutiny on the state level.
My understanding is the law department's counsel for this board. I don't think they've been asked for their opinion on this.
May I ask what if there's been a lot of legal scrutiny already, and no one on this board has asked the law department for an opinion, what would be the point of asking the law department
Well,
now?
I for one would like to have an understanding of how this plays into our fiduciary duty. I'd like to have their view on the state rules and regulations that are cited in this resolution. And until last night, the agenda reflected this would be a discussion, and I don't mind discussing this. I'm raising my questions so we can have an informed discussion. That's why I'm asking these questions, and I would value their input. And I think the proper way to go about something like this is to make sure that this is a well-considered decision when it's made.
The state law, the insurance law, has governed the examination of these systems for forever. And Regulation 85, which has been re-upped many times, is posted on the Department of Financial Services website. That's, I believe, well known to the law department. It's a regulation the systems have been living under for a very long time. So we're going back years.
And it provides for audit and inspection to make sure there aren't conflicts of interest? Is that what this law is about?
The insurance law, under the insurance law, the former Insurance Department of the state and now Department of Financial Services, which is the product of the merger of the banking department and the insurance department, examines all public pension funds.
Examines them
including-
for what?
Examines them for, I'll just give you some outline from Mr. Superintendent Lawsky's letter to Comptroller Liu. Recently, they stated that they would be looking at information technology, policies and procedures in place at NYSERS and the city funds to root out any pension spiking issues, enterprise risk management and other governance issues, controls to prevent conflicts of interest, and the use of consultants, advisory councils, and other similar structures, and actuarial assumptions. So this was posted, there was a lot of press coverage. This was October 8th, 2013. So this is really not a new issue, and you may recall that Governor Cuomo issued a press release some time ago that he was looking to bolster prohibitions on placement agents, having been the Attorney General who investigated Hevesy.
Yeah, look, I have no objection to rooting out conflicts of interest. Obviously, that's something we want to do. My concern is that I'm just not comfortable. I haven't heard that a prohibition in total is good or bad for the fund and its ability to properly and responsibly invest for the benefit of the members. That's what's missing for me, as well as a legal opinion from the department about what implications the law department might be behind this.
If I may just chime in, this issue has been bandied before the board for several years now, going back to before Controller Lou. This goes back to Controller Thompson. I have my own issues with regards to placement agent matter, and I believe Controller Stringer is of the opinion that he would be able to address that with some staffing and different levels of those who are monitoring various investment classes. And I'm fine with that. As far as a quantifiable report as to how this would affect the performance of the portfolio, I don't think there's any way really to quantify this in terms of a number. Whether this is more of a governance issue, and I don't think it lends itself to saying, you know, this will give you 10 bips on an investment or whatever. I don't think it would do that. However, it does address what has been a slow phasing out of this matter. We're down to 2 placement agents currently in the portfolio. I believe one will probably be out of the portfolio by the end of the year. And so I think this matter is pretty much moot at this point. Right. And we did have, you know, some other questions that have been addressed over time with regards to this. So as far as I know, I understand Commissioner Lawsky is, I think that's his title, Commissioner, Superintendent, I'm sorry. Superintendent Lawsky is, we're used to commissioners around here. So Superintendent Lawsky is currently auditing NYSERS, and I think the intent is to go around various. So at this point, this is a matter that, for me, it's pretty much over. I think, you know, the vote today is not going to really change much. It just solidifies the fact that we will not be using placement agents in the future. So I don't know what else can be added to the conversation with regards to the rules. I would normally ask the law department this question, but the law department is not here, as they usually tend not to be. And I think the law is pretty much solid that, you know, they don't want placement agents in these portfolios. And we did live through, unfortunately, New York State Common Retirement System and the conflict and the unfortunate arrest of various public officials there, which we would not want to see ever again.
We all know, you know, placement agents like stockbrokers or lawyers or doctors can be corrupt, but, you know, there's a time and a place where it's useful to have outside advisors and people bringing potential investments to us. I'm expressing no view pro or con. I'm concerned that questions haven't been answered and that this is not ripe for a vote today. Let me ask you, you say there are 2 placement agents at the moment. One will be out at the end of the year, which begs the question about the other. Is this a real prohibition or going forward prohibition? What's the result of this if it passes?
So the 2 placement agents are within public equities. There were 2 of our non-US equity managers. And the one that Joe was referring to, basically they roll off, so they're no longer using a placement agent. The other one is grandfathered in.
How does that work?
It's just, they had a placement agent when we first hired them. This is
Under
going
contract.
back under
Yeah, under
contract.
contract.
Before 2007. Then we did a new manager search, and we completed that in 2012. So we didn't use their placement agent again for that search because we already had a contract with them. So in effect, you could argue that doesn't apply there either anymore because we have a relationship
this
with them.
prohibition would not include them,
It would, going forward, absolutely.
but it would
The
allow them to go.
The placement has been made.
No, I understand. I just want to know what this means.
This is
This is going
prospective,
forward.
It's going forward, correct.
I'm not sure it says that, but if that's what you mean by it.
I think Janice had some other questions.
thank you for answering our questions, and I know some of our fellow board members were here in 2009 during the first round of discussions on this. I unfortunately was not, so I know other people have a history, so I do have some questions. And with regard to the quantification of the effect on the returns, the future returns of the pension fund, or the access to these managers, have you taken a look at the investment manager databases that are used, from which we select asset managers, to determine the percentage of total managers who use placement agents, as well as the percentage of total smaller managers who use placement agents? Because I think we've all discussed in the past that smaller managers are a benefit to the fund, as well as managers that control their size, in that they tend to have better performance than managers that get too big. So obviously there's a benefit to the funds to having smaller managers because they tend to outperform. So what is the percentage of small managers that utilize placement agents, and how are we targeting those managers for inclusion going forward?
So, I don't have percentages of the smaller managers in the universe that use placement agents, but what I can tell you is that we have had an open door policy that has now become very much enhanced over the last month or two, where I would agree with you that you might use a placement agent for those smaller managers who think they can't get into our door, right? Whereas the larger managers should not need one, because everybody has our information, our contact information, our door is actually always open. So for those smaller managers, as Susanna mentioned earlier, we have now dedicated, we've already had a person in public markets, and we've already had a person on our team in private equity to be that point person for these smaller managers. We now have a person in real estate, a person in hedge funds, and we have a developing manager program, as you know, where we use our consultants, our 5 general consultants, to help us with those searches. So with this new search process in public markets, actually I think we have a vast database now than we used to have before. Where we use eVestment, as you know, has thousands of managers in that database. And one of the consultants for one of the boards has its own proprietary database, but that actually has even more managers than the eVestment database. So, I mean, at this point, I feel very comfortable and confident that we will especially provide access to all of the smaller managers that may think they need to use a placement agent to get to us. Because we're taking a very active, proactive approach to reaching those managers, and using our consultants to help us do it as well.
So I love that we've got this open door policy and we're dedicating people to these folks. But these little managers that we now can't utilize a placement agent probably won't be able to reach out to us. So part of my question was,
Wait, I'm
are
sorry,
we
why won't they be able to reach out to us? We just had a conference with over 750 mostly small firms that are now engaged with the controller's office, now understand our process, have met our staff, and we're just announced a $1 billion plan that includes a whole new host of ways to reach out and engage with small firms. So the controller has addressed a whole new way of doing business with small firms. So you ask us for studies and quantifiable statistics about why this is necessary. I would ask you, sort of what evidence or what studies or what have you heard that maybe you could cite and explain to us why you think that this is not a good idea, or what you're hearing in terms of the number of firms that use placement agents, how they engage with other systems that maybe don't have this prohibition, or why you might think that this could be a good idea.
And I would add to that smaller firms would benefit because they won't feel the need to hire a lobbyist. And as the comptroller said at the Emerging Manager Conference, he said, bring your A game, the door is open, you don't need a middle person, we will hear your proposal.
I also want to mention one other thing. You mentioned the new process, but even under the old process, in our developing manager program and our emerging manager program, we haven't had placement agents.
Do you want to just talk about our developing manager program?
Sure. We define it as for public markets, public equities, and public fixed income. We define it as managers from $1 to $5 billion in AUM in total for the firm. We have a long history of doing business with such managers going back to the early 90s.
So, again, I don't have an opinion at this point as to whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. This is the first we're discussing it, so I'm asking questions to educate myself in order to make an informed decision. I've done no studies on my own, which is, again, but I'm not proposing the resolution either. I'm asking the folks who are making the proposal about the factors that went into the decision to propose this resolution. And one of the questions that I was trying to get at earlier is, I do think it's great that we have the open door policy and that there are people that are now dedicated to smaller managers. My question is, how are we proactively targeting these managers who would otherwise, who don't have staff and are sitting in their offices investing, don't have marketing staff? Are we proactively targeting these folks for inclusion? Are we reaching out to them? Do we have a list? And
Absolutely. We've done that already a lot in hedge funds. And the board has seen those managers, a list of those managers. In fact, we're going to bring one of those managers in at the executive session. We've done that very actively in opportunistic fixed income. We've done it extremely actively in private equity. We have a dedicated allocation to private equity small managers that the board's approved. We have already investments in real estate, and we have a very active effort going on right now with our 2 consultants in real estate, where we've got lists of smaller managers already, many of whom we've already met with more than once. So absolutely we have. One other point I would want to add to this is that using a placement agent is expensive. It's not cheap. They take a piece of your business. And they take that piece, because I ran a hedge fund, and many of them came to me and said, hey, we'll be your placement agent, and they'll take a piece of your management fee on whatever dollars that you generate in raising for not just 1 year, but for the next 3 years, and in often cases it's 5 years. So it's not cheap to use those folks. And what we're trying to say to these smaller managers is you don't need to spend that money. And the other thing is that we're not actually even sure, I don't feel comfortable being sure that we're not getting charged higher fees from that manager who used a placement agent because they had to pay the placement agent. So it's a big concern overall, and I think it's important to add that layer of fees that's a big issue.
Can I ask another question?
Ask.
And one of the things that we have to consider as fiduciaries in making these sorts of decisions is, what do others do like us who are in similar circumstances, similar fiduciaries, institutional investors do in this case? So can you tell us about what other states or municipalities in the United States have done with regard to this total ban on placement agents?
It's funny you brought that up, because during your conversation, I asked Barry, our consultant here, about how many funds does he advise on. He said over 30, of which over 30, that's about $600 billion, over $600 billion roughly under management, assets under management, and about 5 use placement agents. That's less than 7. Allow for the use of placement agents. That's less than 17% of the total portfolios that he's advising use placement agents. So I think, getting back to my original point, this is unfortunately, whether you like it or not, this is an issue that's pretty much moot at this point. I think it's being phased out little by little, and having the ban at this point is just a vindication of the issue, and it's done at this point. So,
I mean, all that may be true, but that to me indicates why perhaps a ban isn't necessary. I still am concerned that I haven't heard an articulation of why an absolute prohibition is in the best interest of the fund. I understand that may be a negative factor in evaluating investments and might discourage us from choosing to invest with a firm that uses a placement agent because it may be more expensive. There may be some some hint of conflict of interest or whatever. Those are all reasons that we would appropriately consider. I'm uncomfortable that I just haven't heard an articulation that an absolute prohibition is in the best interest of the fund. I am not expressing a view against the resolution. My concern is frankly with the process. This was on the agenda as a matter to be discussed, which we're now discussing. I understand some now want to move it to a vote. I think that's premature and unnecessary. There are no decisions that are pending that this bears on. So I would vote to, if someone's going to move to vote on this, I vote that we table a vote for next month to allow further discussion. I move for that.
Well, I think we'd like to at least caucus over the matter before we talk about whether to table it or move for a vote. Or the issue, I mean, I think I've had my questions answered. And when did we take the vote originally with regards to placement agents before? And which asset class? Private equity as 2009. And I don't know if the argument then against prohibiting placement agents and then was as vociferous as it is right now. But I'd like to at least take some time to think about this matter and come back in a few minutes and we can talk about it a little some more then. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just take a quick caucus, thank you.
Who are we waiting for?
Yeah, they're coming.
Okay, we're back on the record.
So I second the motion to table this agenda item.
I made a
He
motion.
made the motion to table, but, well, let's take a roll call vote whether to allow the table.
Is he, I'm sorry, is Mr. Maynard or Rep who can make the motion? Just a point of
He's-
procedure.
Yes, he's a
I
police
believe
commissioner's
representing police
trustee.
commissioner's rep, so, but I'd like a roll call vote whether to allow the table or not.
BBA,
No.
DEA,
No.
SBA,
No.
LBA,
No.
CEA.
No.
Mayor's office,
Aye.
controller,
No,
police commissioner,
Aye.
and we don't have a rep for finance, so the motion for a table does not carry.
I would like to make a motion to accept the resolution prepared and presented by the Controller's Office. However, I would like to make note that there was a vote prior in 2000, I believe it was 2009, presented by, at that time, Controller Thompson with regards to accepting a ban on placement agents. And that was May 5th, 2009, it was adopted. And the resolution was resolved that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Controller to suspend the use of placement agents, firms, and middlemen in the engagement of private equity firms by the Police Pension Fund. And my understanding is on page 37 of the record, the vote was taken and it was unanimous by all parties at that fund meeting, which included the Mayor's Office, Commissioner of Finance, and the Police Commissioner. So, in keeping with that, this ban just extends it to all other asset classes on the portfolio, and my motion will be to accept the recommendation by the Controller, just extending this ban on placement agents for private equity, but placing the ban on all asset classes in the fund as per state law. That would be my motion.
Second.
We'll have to
Do we
take a
want
roll call vote.
PBA?
Yes.
DEA?
Yes.
SBA?
Yes.
LBA?
Yes.
CEA?
Yes.
Mayor's office?
I'm going to abstain because, again, I wasn't here in 2009 and still have a lot of questions as a result of this very good discussion today that I would still need the opportunity to hear and consider before making a final decision. I also would like to say that it sounds like a good proposal, but at this time I just simply don't have enough information to make a decision, as well as the fact that we have not received an opinion from the law department on this particular resolution.
Okay, Controller's office?
yes, and if I may say, by eliminating the need for managers to use placement agents to get to New York City, we are saving them money that they could spend on hiring a good marketing team, which is a strategy we want to promote as the pension plans. While we don't have 100% of the information on this issue, we may never have that. We have 99%, and we believe we're doing the right thing for our funds as a fiduciary and for the small firms we want to promote.
Okay,
So I
Police
vote yes.
commissioner?
I abstain. I'd like to just make a couple of points if I might. The suspension is not the same as an absolute prohibition. Also, this is not a resolution that says that investment funds do not need placement agents. Rather, this prohibits totally the use of them. Again, I'm not saying that's a good or bad idea. I abstain because I think the process is not allowed for sufficient discussion on exchange of information.
Okay, the motion carries.
Okay, so, stop it. Thank you. Thank you all for the spirited debate.
Okay, so, next item is a update on the basket clause, and I'm gonna turn it to Susanna.
So just a quick update, because I know we all want to move the meeting along. The extension of the basket clause is moving right along in Albany. We're waiting for an assembly bill number, but we have a sponsor. Ways and Means Committee Chairman Denny Farrell has agreed to carry the bill for us. He's recommended the Senate Finance Committee Chair DeFrancisco in the Senate, and I believe that he is working on that. This week, we should have a bill number, and as soon as it's introduced, I'll circulate it. I think I circulated the language, but we'll circulate the bill, and we may be asking individual organizations for memos of support. Thank you.
So that,
Yep.
so I make a motion that we leave public session and go into executive session.
Okay, for the purposes of discussing potential investments and manager performance and possible decisions regarding any manager performance.
Second.
Thank you. With that, let's get 5